Denny Hamlin has been handed major penalties for an engine infraction, and Hooters is being sued by Hendrick Motorsports. What's going, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got quite a few NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed for today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them straight those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a couple paint schemes that happened revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ross Chastain's 2025 Bushlight scheme that we'll see in 2025. This, I believe, is the first 2025 paint scheme that has been revealed. There's been some updates to it. It still looks great. It looks very similar to 2024, but there's been some different additions to it. It looks pretty good. Looking forward to see on the racetrack in 2025. Next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jacklins' 2024 GoPro scheme that we'll see this weekend at the Milwaukee Mile. I think the scheme looks pretty cool in my opinion. Glad to see the GoPro will be sponsoring McAnally Hilgeman Racing this weekend. Hopefully Jack Wood can have a solid run with this paint scheme this weekend in Milwaukee. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Denny Hamlin's 2024 FedEx Care scheme that we'll see tomorrow at Daytona. I like this paint scheme a lot. Been a big fan of the FedEx schemes. This one's no exception. I think JJR knocked it off the park. It looks pretty excellent, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack tomorrow evening at Daytona. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jason Alexander. As it was announced earlier today that Jason Alexander will make his Truck Series debut this weekend at the Milwaukee Mile, driving the number 21 truck for Threei Motorsports. Jason Alexander, for those who do not know, has made a couple starts in the ARCA Menards Series. Now, originally, Blake Lothian was supposed to be the driver behind the wheel of the number 21 truck for this weekend, but Blake did not have the funds to run this weekend, so therefore, Jason is going to get the chance and opportunity since ARCA will be in town at the Milwaukee Mile as well. I really hope Jason can do a solid job this weekend. Again, we haven't seen the pace speed from Floridian. They're kind of in that bubble of making the race on points or not. Hopefully Jason Alexander can do a really solid and a really great job this weekend at the Milwaukee Mile. Hope he can do a good job this weekend. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tim Vaines. As it was announced earlier today that Tim Vaines will be driving a 74 for Mike Harmon Racing this weekend at Daytona. Tim Vaines has been a very controversial figure in NASCAR over the course of the last couple of years. He was part of Glory to God Racing, which obviously that organization is no longer around, and has not made starts in the NASCAR Xfinity Series since 2021. I expect him to struggle, and he's probably going to fail to qualify for the race tonight, unfortunately, because Mike Harmon Racing doesn't have a lot of points to back it up. There's one or two cars that are going home this weekend, and as much as I think it really would be interesting to see him run tonight, I don't think Tim Vaines is going to make the show. I think he sadly will struggle. I don't think he's going to run very, very well, and sadly, I think he will sadly not make the race, unfortunately, this weekend at Daytona International Speedway for the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Hope I'm proven wrong, but I'm not expecting him to make it tonight in the Xfinity race. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jacklins. As it was announced earlier today that Jacklins has signed as the official meet partner of NASCAR starting in 2025. Jacklins is one of the biggest known beef jerky brands out there, and it's huge to see which Jacklins, of course, has sponsored some NASCAR cars in the past. I believe they sponsored teams like Roush Fenway back into the 2000s or other organizations in the past. And it's pretty cool to see that one of the biggest food brands out there they can get at gas stations and convenience stores is going to be on the NASCAR circuit going forward. I think this is a really huge deal for NASCAR, all things considered. I think it's very excellent to see nonetheless, and pretty exciting for sure to see that Jacklins has become the official meet partner of NASCAR. It's really exciting stuff. Glad to see they're going to be part of NASCAR going forward and starting in the 2025 NASCAR season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Richard Childress Racing and Austin Dillon. As it was confirmed earlier today that the RCR and Austin Dillon appeal is going to be taking place, the final appeal that is, will be taking place on Monday. Remember, we talked about this on the channel yesterday, but it was officially confirmed that Austin Dillon and Richard Childress Racing had lost their original appeal. They were trying to find a way to get back in the playoffs after NASCAR had taken their playoff eligibility away after what had happened in Richmond Raceway. And they were trying to find their way to get back into the NASCAR playoffs. Now, they will go to that final appeal on Monday, and they will try to make their way in. Now, Do I think they have any chance of opportunity of making it back in? No, absolutely not. Very rarely someone goes to the final appeal and they win. Now, the teams in this situation, they have the court. They're going to be ones that show the evidence of other situations that NASCAR has not penalized on before. But even though they will have a chance to win, I think it's very slim. I don't think they're going to win the appeal. Again, I think NASCAR is won this in my opinion. I don't think Bill Knowles, who of course manages Langley Speedway, I don't think he's going to change this overall. I don't think he's going to change it. I think it's over. I don't see them winning. I understand them trying to try to get back in, but really they don't have any ground to stand on, unfortunately. I don't think they're going to win. I sadly think they're going to lose. I know some fans of Austin Dillon want him to win this appeal, but unfortunately, I do not think Austin Dillon is going to win. I sadly think he will not end up winning the appeal. I think he ends up losing. Once it's officially announced, we'll likely discuss here on the channel on Tuesday potentially, but I don't believe that Austin Dillon is going to win the appeal, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Threei. As it was announced earlier today that Threei will officially sponsor Kyle Busch in the season finale at Phoenix International Raceway. This will be the only race that Threei is going to sponsor. Obviously, they got a new sponsorship with other companies like the Zone brand that's been sponsoring Kyle Busch for a lot of this year. We kind of were wondering if Threei was going to be coming back. There have been rumors and reports early in the year, I think back in February, that they were supposed to come back and sponsor, but Threei never officially confirmed that they were coming back. Threei, of course, has been working with Childress Racing since the 2021 to 2022 season when they originally sponsored Tyler Reddick, and then, of course, they started working with Kyle Busch in 2023. And Kyle, of course, got his last Cup Series win back at Gateway last year in the Threei sponsorship. I think the car will end up looking very similar to that, but I'm just glad to see if Threei is going to be coming back at the end of the year. It's been unfortunate to see him not be on the card all this year, considering Threei's had a big partnership and branding with Childress Racing, but I'm glad to see that they are finally officially going to be coming back, and maybe, just maybe, the Threei lot can come around and maybe find a way to get Kyle Busch his first win in a year and a half, because Kyle Busch is still looking for his first win in 2024. Granted, Childress Racing has shown a lot more pace and speed as of late, and I do think he's got a really good chance and opportunity to maybe win this weekend at Daytona. But again, I think it's just really good to see that they're going to be back sponsoring Kyle Busch this weekend. It's just, I think the colors will look really good. I think the car will, like I said, will look very, very similar to what Kyle Busch has ran. I think it's going to be fun to see him back on the car. Obviously, they've had some big sponsorship come into play. I think it's pretty awesome and great to see that they're officially making their comeback in return and will sponsor Kyle Busch at the final race at Phoenix. I hope this means they're going to be back on the car more in 2025, but we'll have to wait and see if they do decide to get back on the car more in 2025 if they do end up getting approved by NASCAR going forward. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about an option tire. Now, we already seen the option tire in place at Richmond and North Wilkesboro, and we saw the success of the option tire, of course, at Richmond Raceway a couple weekends ago. That was one of the things that kind of got overshadowed by the Austin Dillon controversy, is how well the option tire worked at Richmond. According to what Bob Pockers asked Kyle Busch about, apparently they tested multiple different option tires. They tested a red tire and a black tire. And Kyle Busch gave a little bit of insight in regards to that option tire. He says he liked it when he ran it in the morning. He said he liked the original one first that had more tire fall off than the second one, which had less tire fall off, he said. He said with the one that had more fall off, he said it had 3/4 of a second fall off over 60 laps. And then he said for the tire that had a little more hardness on it, he said it had basically 4 to 5 tenths of fall off. I like a tire that has a lot more fall off, and I appreciate Goodyear doing what they can to try to make the racing product a lot better. I think one of the biggest things that we have seen in recent years, and basically with the next-gen car, is the next-gen car has not raced amazing on short tracks, except at a couple, at tracks like Bristol and at tracks like Richmond, because the tire actually works very, very well when you have a track that's very abrasive. Martinsville is a track that is kind of abrasive, but they've also repaved it multiple times in recent years. Well, the concrete and stuff, they've had to fix the concrete. So you can't really repave concrete unless you go back to asphalt. Then you might find a way to repave it. But I do think it's good to hear that there's at least some positive news in regards to that might create some better racing. Because if we can find a way to make short track racing better in this country, I think it's going to make a lot of people happy, including myself. So I really hope that they can continue testing this going forward. They did not say if they're going to be using it at Martinsville during the second to last race. I do think they need to because the racing product needs to be as good as possible. I really hope they decide to go ahead and use the option tire at Martinsville so the racing product can be better later this year in Martinsville for the NASCAR Cup Series race and hopefully can go back to where it was in 2021 where the racing was very, very good then. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episodes as we're talking about early start times versus late start times once again. This has been a major debate and discussion that's been going on in the industry over the course of the last couple of days. And I feel like this conversation has been growing because NASCAR had the Cup Series race delayed from Sunday to Monday, but they started the race at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. And a lot of people feel like that there should be a way for tracks to have earlier start times. Well, someone was interviewed about why they go ahead and do later start times. Brian Herbst, who is the SVP, I believe, of certain areas like digital stuff, he says if the overarching goal is to drive fan interest in the sport and make sure there's as many people are paying attention as possible, trying to get those 300,000 extra viewers on a typical Sunday is important. Look, I get it and kind of understand where he's coming from. We want to get as many eyes as possible. What NASCAR said is that if you have later start times, you're going to have a better chance and opportunity of getting those fans to watch. Here's the problem. 8 or 9 of the 24 races that have happened so far this year have either been postponed or have been delayed. I'm not saying that you have to have earlier start times at tracks that do have lights, but at tracks that don't have lights, Michigan, New Hampshire, Talladega, Dover, you name it, Sonoma, for example. Tracks like that don't have lights around it, you need to be starting these races a little bit earlier. Because one of the reasons why I think earlier start times work a lot better at tracks that don't have lights is because, yes, you may still have a chance of rain coming into play. But what is the most important thing? You're going to have a better chance and opportunity to completing the race on time. I understand that you're trying to get those eyeballs, but you can't screw the fans over like this, especially when the fans are paying lots of money, which, yes, NASCAR tickets are a lot cheaper than like going to NFL or going to MLB games, but you need to find a way to make times be a little bit earlier. Now, NASCAR did send an olive branch where they are going to, of course, have every single green flag lap with NBC for Atlanta, of course, Daytona this weekend, and then, of course, at Talladega later this year. But I think another way to have an olive branch to make the fans much more happy is having earlier start times at tracks that don't have lights. Your goal, in my opinion, is to try to get every lap of the race complete or try to get the race done in one day. People don't have millions of dollars, Brian. That's why we're asking for NASCAR to have earlier start times. I know Denny Hamlin kind of argued for having earlier start times and taking less money. And I think if they wanted to go ahead and do this, I think a lot more fans would be very, very happy. Are they going to do it? I don't know at this point. They're probably never going to go back to earlier start times at this point, unfortunately. But I feel like if NASCAR wanted to find a way to attract those fans and keep them around going forward and stop losing fans, I think you got to start them earlier. So I really hope NASCAR going forward changes their minds on this and it stop letting the TV networks dictate what's going on and find a way to get more fans watching by having earlier start times. I think having consistent start times as well would help grow the sport over time and stop competing with the NFL or try to actually compete against the NFL and run it at the same time, in my honest opinion. And now we're go ahead jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Steve Phelps. Now, Steve Phelps earlier today was on the Happy Harvick podcast. It is done on Fox Sports and also on FS1 as well. And he had a lot of very interesting comments about certain things, like the charter negotiations. But one thing that got a lot of people talking is what happened at Richmond Raceway. And he kind of talked about his defense on those comments. He defends NASCAR's decision to go ahead and basically take the playoff eligibility away from Austin Dome, but he also talked about maybe potentially some new rules coming in for over-aggressive driving. One thing I mentioned in the last episode is that we feel like that there need to be rules coming into play for over-aggressive driving. Back in the day, in the 1980s and the 1990s and even the mid to early 2000s as well, NASCAR would penalize drivers for multiple laps in a race for basically running into other drivers, and sometimes we get fined for those actions on the racetrack as well. What Steve Phelps was kind of suggesting was maybe having like a 15-second penalty, maybe having like a 1-lap penalty. We see those on road courses. If you cut a corner, you basically get a 30-second penalty if you don't serve it. Shane Van Gisbergen got cost a second-place finish because of that 30-second penalty, which I believe is still one of the worst calls that I've seen all year, considering how much he barely went off the racetrack. I think if NASCAR, though, found a way to penalize drivers in the race and officiate in the race for overaggressive driving, that would work a lot more in the favor of a lot of fans. There is no reason in any shape or form that we should be waiting till Wednesday of the first week to have a decision made. Those decisions should be made within the first 5 to 10 minutes of the race being concluded, where the fans are still at the racetrack. If someone intentionally wrecks somebody for the win, you send them to the back of the field. That is basically the only justification that they have, in my opinion. Because we can't be waiting 2 weeks. We're still in this Austin Dillon process, mind you, and this should have already been taken care of. There's no reason that it should still be going on at this point. I really hope NASCAR is looking at adding this. Now, Steve did say that they're most likely not going to add over-aggressive driving penalties until next year, most likely. They don't like to add this kind of stuff for the beginning of to like through the middle of the year, and that's fine and understandable. I just really hope and pray that NASCAR does add some of these penalties going forward, so we can absolutely see NASCAR do a better job of this, because there's no reason some of the stuff that's been happening should be happening overall, to be honest with you, with the over-aggressive driving. NASCAR needs to get back control, and I really hope they do get back control going forward in the future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Lewis Hamilton. Now, we're going to talk about Max Verstappen and Kyle Larson here in the next story of the episode, but first, let's talk about Lewis Hamilton. So Denny Hamlin was actually talking about the Kyle Larson and Max Verstappen debate and brought up some very interesting comments. Now, he first was asked by his co-host Jarrett Allen about maybe putting Max Verstappen behind the wheel of a 2311 racing car. Well, Denny Hamlin did say that would be very interesting, but he also said he would have to switch energy drinks. Obviously, we know that he's kind of associated with Monster Energy, and Max Verstappen is associated with Red Bull, considering he drives for Red Bull Racing in Formula 1. But he also mentions the fact that Lewis Hamilton could be someone that they could get to drive for 2311 Racing. It's no secret that Lewis Hamilton in the past has been interested in racing in NASCAR. Earlier this year, as a matter of fact, during the Miami Grand Prix weekend, he was asked by multiple media members about potentially doing something like NASCAR, and he said, yeah, he'd be very interested in doing it. And we've seen people like Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick advocate for giving a driver like Lewis Hamilton the chance and opportunity to drive for 2311. I think one of the coolest things that we've seen in recent years is with the next-gen car especially, we've seen a lot of crossover and drivers come out of retirement. Drivers like Greg Biffle have come out of retirement. Ryan Newman's come out of retirement. We've seen people like Jenson Button come and race in NASCAR. Fernando Alonso's expressed interest in the past. We've, of course, seen Kimi Räikkönen race in NASCAR. We've had interest in drivers like Carl Edwards and Kurt Busch and other guys coming out of retirement. We've seen a lot of drivers come out of retirement and come from different leagues and forms of racing. Same with Jordan Taylor, and test it out. And I would really love to see, during like an off week, for example, same with Juan Montoya coming back, but I would absolutely love to see potential possibility of finding a way for this to happen, where a driver like Lewis Hamilton could come over and race in NASCAR. Because I think he'd be very interested in doing that. Now, obviously, he is going to Ferrari next year, and I don't know how much association have Monster Energy over there at Ferrari, but I certainly would love to see Lewis Hamilton come over and race in NASCAR before the end of this year. Obviously, there's not a lot of road courses available, and the F1 schedule is very, very long, but I would really love to see this happen for the growth of NASCAR overall, because Lewis Hamilton is one of the biggest teams in motorsports. I really hope this truly ends up happening, so I think for everybody involved, it would be really good for the fans. So I really hope it ends up happening, and I really hope we do get to see Lewis Hamilton race in NASCAR in the not-so-distant future before his Formula 1 career is over and his racing career is over in general, because he'll be 40 next year. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Max Verstappen once again. Now, over the last week or so, there's been a lot of debate and a lot of chatter about, is Max Verstappen a better race car driver all around than Kyle Larson, or is Kyle Larson a better driver than Max Verstappen all around? Well, Kyle Larson said this about a week or so ago when he won the Knoxville Nationals. After he won the Knoxville Nationals, he says that he is a better all-around race car driver than Max Verstappen. He basically said that Max probably cannot get into a sprint car and succeed. He also said that Max probably couldn't get into a cup car at Bristol and he wouldn't succeed. And he says you couldn't quote that. But he also said he probably wouldn't be able to be successful in IndyCar and Formula One as Max has been. But he says in any other discipline, he'd be able to be very, very successful. Now, Max Verstappen was asked comments from Luke Smith from The Athletic about Kyle Larson's comments. He was asked about Kyle Larson in the situation, and he says that that's fine. Everyone thinks their own way, right? And also, Luke Smith also asked Fernando Alonso about this as well. Max had very interesting comments. Now, we know that there's been a lot of talk about this because we know how good of drivers both Max and Kyle Larson are. Max Verstappen is a three-time Formula One champion looking to get his fourth Formula One championship. He's one of the best drivers in Formula One history, nearly won 60 career Formula One races. But Max Verstappen has only raced in Formula One. Kyle Larson, on the other hand, has a more versatile schedule. That being said, it kind of was not the week to talk crap about Max Verstappen the week after you basically ended up spinning out and wrecking yourself out in Michigan, even though Denny Hamlin pretty much did the same thing as well in the air. And we saw Mark Truex Jr. lose it as well because it was so windy at the racetrack, but Larson just lost it. But when I talk about all-around drivers and all-around talent, is Max a great driver? Yes. There is no denying that. Max Verstappen is all around a very good race car driver, but Max Verstappen is not racing anything outside of Formula One and go-karts. Kyle Larson has raced in dirt. He's raced in the Rolex 24 and has won the Rolex 24. He, of course, is an Indy 500 Rookie of the Year. He's won 27 NASCAR Cup Series races and a Cup Series championship. The Brickyard 400, the Southern 500, and, of course, the Coca-Cola 600. He only needs to win the Daytona 500 to become one of maybe 10 or 11 drivers who've won all four major Crown Jewel events. I think Max Verstappen, no doubt, is a really good driver. And yeah, again, like I said, Larson probably shouldn't have talked crap after. But I really would love to see one day these two go up against each other because they're two of the best race car drivers on the planet and in the world. And I really hope it does end up happening in the future, that we do get to see both these drivers compete against one another. And I think it's interesting to see that Max kind of kept his comments shut. I really hope maybe, because there's been rumors of the Olympics, bringing Olympics back at one point, or motorsports back in the Olympics. I would really love to see motorsports come in the Olympics, so Larson, or maybe like a driver swap, for example, where one guy drives one car and the other guy drives in the other. And I think Larson, though, would be able to get up to speed quicker in a Formula One car than Max Verstappen would be able to get up to speed in a NASCAR Cup car. Some will disagree, and that's fine and understandable, but I think that Kyle Larson, all around, personally, in my opinion, is a better all-around driver than Max Verstappen, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kaulig Racing. Now, basically, there was a media alert that came out earlier today to many media members that Kaulig Racing is teasing an announcement for later today at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the fan experience. And earlier tonight, they put out a little bit of a teaser. If you take a look at this teaser, there is a plane inside of it. Kaulig Racing is expected to announce at least one of their Xfinity Series drivers for 2025. It will not be AJ Allmendinger, who of course is going back to the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025, driving a number 16 car next season. Now the big question is going to be, who could this driver potentially be? Many people have been speculating Christian Eckes. Christian Eckes has been heavily linked to be driving for Kaulig Racing for the 2025 season, as Christian Eckes and many people like Bob Pockers and myself have heard that he's likely moving up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series full-time in the 2025 NASCAR Xfinity season. I think he's ready to move up. He's been really good in the Truck Series, 3 wins, won the regular season championship, and has a really great chance and opportunity of winning the championship in 2024. But I don't think it's going to be Christian Eckes, at least according to the photo. What a lot of people believe is it's going to be Daniel Dye. Daniel Dye currently drives part-time for Kaulig Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in the number 10 car, and Daniel Dye does bring a little bit of sponsorship and a little funding to the table from safety companies and other companies as well that have worked with Daniel Dye, and also his father, of course, works at Daytona as one of the ambassadors for one of the companies out there for the NASCAR Foundation. Now look, if I had to choose between Daniel Dye and Christian Eckes to announce, I would announce Christian Eckes, but Daniel Dye has improved in the Truck Series this year. He's gone from being a mid-pack driver to being a top 10 driver on a week-by-week basis, but he's still looking for his first truck win. He obviously brings sponsorship and funding to the table, and I do think he's going to likely be the driver now. So that's not saying that Christian Eckes isn't going to Kaulig Racing. I do think Christian Eckes is going to end up at Kaulig Racing in the 2025 season. I just think that he'll be announced later. Maybe we go to his home state of Watkins Glen in a month or so, and that's when they announce Christian Eckes. We know he also had talked to going to the Cup Series potentially, but he's had conversations to call it. So I do believe the announcement that is going to be coming out for Kaulig Racing later today, which when it does officially come and gets announced, we'll discuss it here on the channel. I do think it's going to be Daniel Dye. We don't know what the rest Xfinity lineup is going to be. Shane Van Gisbergen is expected to move up to the Cup Series, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. But we do think that they'll be announcing their first of multiple drivers at the organization for 2025 very, very soon. I think it'll be Daniel Dye for sure. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Preece. Now, Ryan Preece did a one-on-one with Bob Pockrass very recently. He was asked a lot of questions, certainly about Daytona and the flip from last year. Spoke about other things like what happened between him and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. earlier this year at Richmond that triggered a lot of the incidents a couple weekends ago, where he actually said that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. did not do that intentionally to him. But one big question that's been surrounding Ryan Preece over the course of the last couple weeks is what is his future past 2024? Now, he's the only Stewart-Haas Racing driver outside of Riley Herbst that is currently not signed at the moment for 2025. Chase Briscoe, of course, is going to drive the 19 car for Joe Gibbs Racing next year. We know Noah Gragson is joining Threei Motorsports, most likely driving the number 34 car next year. And we know that Josh Berry will be replacing Harrison Burton in the number 21 car next year. We'll talk about Harrison here in just a little bit. We also know that Cole Custer is moving back up to the NASCAR Cup Series to drive the number 41 car for the Haas factory team. Now, Ryan Preece was asked questions about this, and he says he still does not know what he is doing for the 2025 season. Now, there have been talk and speculation about him potentially being teammates at Hailie Deegan over Haas factory team, but that all kind of changed very recently when it was confirmed that that basically Sam Mayer will be driving a 41 car, and of course that Sheldon Creed will be going to drive a 00 for the team. So where is Ryan Preece going to go? Well, there is a chance he could stay in the NASCAR Cup Series next year. There have been rumors and speculation that RFK Racing could be looking to buy a third charter going into 2025, and we've seen Adam Stern mention him very recently as a potential candidate to join that organization in a third car. Why? Kroger. Kroger has been a sponsor of Ryan Preece in the past when he drove for JT Doherty Racing from the 2019 through the 2021 season. So he's had association with them in the past. Now, where could they get the charter from for him to go to RFK Racing? Well, there is a chance they get the charter from Rick Ware Racing themselves. Rick Ware Racing does have an alliance with RFK Racing in a pretty big way. I know some have said Justin Haley could get the seat, but Justin Haley, of course, is likely going to Spire. We know Kyle Busch isn't going over to Spire. So we do think that Ryan Preece, if they do expand to a third car next year, he may be the third driver. Now, look, Ryan Preece has definitely struggled in the NASCAR Cup Series. There is no denying that. But Ryan Preece is not a bad driver. He has talent. He's done a pretty good job at times in the lower series. He's, of course, won race in the modifieds and has shown some flashes of brilliance in the Cup Series. Go back to Martinsville last year where he had one of the fastest cars early in the event and won the first stage for crying out loud and almost won the Clash last year as well before an engine failure set in. I think that Ryan Preece would be a really good candidate to join RFK Racing. If not, he could go back to trucks for an organization like ThorSport perhaps. He could go to Xfinity drive for a team like AM, but I don't know if that's going to happen at this point. I do think Ryan Preece will find a ride. He does have a little bit of sponsorship and funding with him, but I'm not exactly sure where he is going to be headed at this point for 2025. But it sounds like he is in talks and conversations for a team next year. We'll see where he ends up going, and we'll see where he ends up for the 2025 season. I really hope he does find a seat and finds a ride for the 2025 NASCAR season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about silly season once again. There's a couple of very interesting inklings and from multiple different sources about potential NASCAR silly season moves, not just for the NASCAR Xfinity Series, but for the NASCAR Cup Series as well. According to the NASCAR Rumor Nostalgia account, which puts a lot of rumors and potential things they've heard behind the scenes, one potential possibility is Harrison Burton could move back down to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025 and drive the number 15 car for AM Racing. We obviously know that Hailie Deegan will not be back with AM Racing for the 2025 season, despite the fact that she does have a multi-year contract with the team. Originally had a multi-year contract, but there is a chance she could be in IndyCar in some sort of capacity, maybe in Indy Lights or another series with the team in 2025. There's a video that she put out very recently where she was testing a Formula 3 car, an F3 car, which of course, like an F2000 car, that IndyCar basically does have. Harrison Burton AM Racing is something that I've heard from behind the scenes, so this is not the first time I am hearing this. Now, Harrison Burton is a talented race car driver. I know he has struggled in the NASCAR Cup Series, of course, with the Wood brothers, but I feel like that Harrison Burton was not ready to make the jump up to the NASCAR Cup Series. I think he needed one more year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, which originally the plans was that Team Penske was going to form a NASCAR or keep their NASCAR Xfinity program for 2025. Or 22, I should say. But of course, we know Keselowski left to go to RFK Racing, form that program, and go over there for 2022, which basically kind of puts Hendrick into two and need to bring Harrison Burton up. I think Harrison Burton going back to Xfinity would be a really good move for his career. I've also heard Tricon Garage is another team he's been linked to, but I think that Harrison Burton to the AM Racing organization would make a lot of sense because of the sponsorship and funding that he brings to the table from Dex Imaging. That's one thing that AM Racing's been struggling with, and I continue to hear those rumblings. We'll keep an eye update on that story. We also know most likely Christian Eck is going to College Racing next year. We do know Brandon Jones, William Swatch, and Taylor Gray are also, of course, expected to go over to Joe Gibbs Racing, meaning Brandon will not be back at JRM. Carson Quaffle could be full-time, of course, with JRM next year. But another big rumbling we continue to hear is that Shane Van Gisbergen is likely going to be full-time at Trackhouse Racing in 2025 in the Cup Series. They are expected to acquire one of the Stewart-Haas Racing charters, and Shane does have some sponsorship and funding with him, of course, from racing in supercars. Red Bull might end up working with him next year, and then, of course, the rumors and rumblings about other things, like, of course, WeatherTech coming in. I think Shane Van Gisbergen is ready to make the jump up to the NASCAR Cup Series. He's done a very, very solid job in the Xfinity Series this year with 3 wins so far, multiple top 5s, multiple top 10s. He's still the winningest driver in Xfinity altogether so far, at least from full-time drivers, and I think that he is absolutely ready to make the jump up. I think this will be announced in the not-so-distant future. I think the number will likely be 97. We know Swarr signed a 1-year extension, and obviously it's a 1-year deal because maybe in the future Connor Zilch is going to end up replacing him. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. But we do believe that SVG, also known as Shane Van Gisbergen, is going to be full-time with the Trackhouse Racing organization in the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series. It will be announced here in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Hooters. As it was reported by Adam Stern and multiple reporters in the industry, the Hendrick Motorsports is officially suing Hooters. According to Adam Stern in the Biz Journal, Hooters is being sued by Hendrick Motorsports for $1.7 million in missing payments. This is very similar to what happened with Kyle Busch Motorsports when they sued Rev Racing for about $500 million for payments that they had not received. Remember, it was announced about a month or so ago that Hooters would no longer be working with Hendrick Motorsports. They were supposed to sponsor Chase Elliott for the race at Richmond, but of course Coca-Cola went in and sponsored Chase Elliott at the event with the Slim Chicken sponsorship at Richmond. Obviously, Hooters have been in NASCAR for many, many years and have been working with Hendrick Motorsports from the 2016 season all the way to the end of 2024. Obviously, Hooters is having a lot of financial trouble behind the scenes currently at the moment. There's a lot of rumors about Chapter 11 bankruptcy potentially coming. But obviously, if you have missing payments, which you're supposed to pay those, I think, on October 10th, June or July 10th, if I remember correctly, May 10th, and other days, if they're having missing payments and they're not paying them, of course they're coming like Hendrick Motorsports, and a team can go out there and sue them. This is very similar to what happened with Nature's Bakery, when Nature's Bakery got sued by Stewart-Haas Racing back in 2016 for missing payments and not making a lot of good promises, and then SHR went on to have a very dominant season in 2018, where Kevin Harvick won 8 races, Clint Bowyer got 2 wins, Kurt Busch got a win, and Eric Almirola also got a win in the 2018 season, and all 4 of their cars made it to the round of 8. So there's a chance and possibility that if Hendrick Motorsports gets a lot of their money back, they could put out all 4 of their cars, and all 4 of them may end up making the championship 4 or making the round of 8 if history repeats itself. Again, like I mentioned a second ago, Hooters is in a lot of financial trouble. It is a shame to see this because you think about what Hooters did this year. Hooters got their first win in 30 plus years. The last time prior to Chase Elliott winning at Texas Motor Speedway, the last time they won was with Alan Kulwicki back in 1992, I believe at Atlanta or a track like Phoenix or something like that, back in the 1992 season with Alan Kulwicki. It was, of course, the Hooters curse that had happened for nearly 30-something years. So it is a shame to see that they, of course, are not going to be part of NASCAR going forward, and now you've got Hendrick Motorsports suing them. Now, obviously, I don't think Hendrick Motorsports is going to get all their money back. I do believe that they are going to get some of the money that they lost back, but I don't think they're going to get all the money back. My guess is it'll probably go down from $1.7 million of the money that they're missing. They're probably going to end up getting probably around $1 million of those dollars because Hooters, like I said, they've been closing a lot of stores recently, a lot of franchises. I think they closed about 100 stores over the course of the last year or so. And like I mentioned, there's a really good chance that they're going to file Chapter 11 bankruptcy going forward. And they're in a lot of trouble financially because the economy right now is just not that good at the moment. And a lot of people are struggling financially. So, of course, they're spending their money on a lot of different things like groceries, among other things. And they can't go spend their money at a place like Hooters. It's just a lot of companies, unfortunately, are having these issues, and it's just why companies like Hooters are struggling at the moment financially. I think that they will end up paying Hendrick back in some big way, though, but I think this absolutely, like I said, is a major and a massive, massive story. Because now going forward, they're probably not going to be back in the sport, but it's another big loss for NASCAR overall, too. We've seen a lot of big companies leave in recent years. Mountain Dew's only come back in a sporadic ways. Pepsi really hasn't been part of NASCAR in recent years. You've got other companies like DoorDash that are no longer working in NASCAR. They're not with 23XI anymore. And we've seen other major, massive companies like the Home Depot and, of course, Dollar General in recent years. They're no longer part of NASCAR in any way. Of course, the guy who now runs the Dollar Tree brand or Dollar Store brands, he, of course, used to work at Dollar General. They changed ownership, and that's when it happened. Again, this is a major, massive story for sure that we'll keep an eye on as this story progresses and goes on. But it's pretty major to see that Hooters is no longer going to be part of Hendrick going forward, and they are now being sued by Hendrick Motorsports for missing payments. Very interesting stuff to look at, in my honest opinion, when it comes to this kind of stuff. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Denny Hamlin. Now, I did a little special broadcast on this story while I was at work earlier today, but I'm going to go more in depth on this story. It was confirmed shockingly earlier today that Denny Hamlin has received an L2 penalty. Now, why did Denny Hamlin receive an L2 penalty? Well, according to the announcement, it was because of an engine seal infraction. Denny Hamlin has received 75 driver owner's points, or actually has lost 75 driver owner's points, meaning Denny Hamlin drops from 28 points on the regular season championship to being now 103 points back. This means that Denny Hamlin drops from 3rd in the regular season standings all the way down to 6th in the regular season standings. In addition to that, Denny Hamlin has lost 10 playoff points, and the win that he had at Bristol is now an encumbered win because the engine that was penalized for comes from the win at Bristol Motor Speedway. Chris Gabehart has also been fined $100,000 for this. Now, how did this end up happening? Did Joe Gibbs Racing or Denny Hamlin do this? No, this has nothing to do with Chris Gabehart or have anything to do with Denny Hamlin himself. This comes from TRD. According to a report they sent out and from other reports, it sounds like TRD really screwed up. Toyota Racing Development is the one who develops the engines for Joe Gibbs Racing and sends the engines to Joe Gibbs Racing from their place in Costa Mesa, California. They're supposed to send NASCAR the winning engines before they can go ahead and use it. They're supposed to break down the engines, and NASCAR is supposed to see that. According to what they said, they made a major mistake of doing that, and David Wilson, who will be retiring from TRD at the end of the year, he did come out with a statement earlier today apologizing for what had happened from the issues that happened. He apologized, of course, to Joe Gibbs Racing, Denny Hamlin, Chris Gabehart, and everybody in NASCAR as well. Now, can Denny Hamlin and Joe Gibbs Racing appeal this penalty? They could end up appealing it, and maybe they find a way to reduce it a little bit. As of this time I'm recording, they have not said they're going to appeal the penalty, but they're probably going to get asked this weekend about this situation. I'm a little surprised Denny Hamlin did not have an emergency podcast in regards to this situation. But this is really one of the first big penalties we have seen so far this year. And it's crazy to think it's happening 1 week before the playoffs technically began, because after this week, you've got 1 week of the regular season. There's a lot of major implications for Denny Hamlin and Joe Gibbs Racing here. Number one, Denny Hamlin dropping from 3rd to 6th in the regular season championship. This drops Denny Hamlin for getting about 10 playoff points extra, now to only getting 5 or 6 playoff points, bringing him out of contention there. But speaking of bringing out of contention, with this penalty, Denny Hamlin has no chance of winning the regular season championship unless Tyler Reddick, Chase Elliott, and Kyle Larson all end up collapsing. Because Kyle Larson is 32 points back, Chase Elliott's 10 back, and Tyler Reddick is the current regular season leader. And judging by how good Tyler Reddick, Chase Elliott, and Larson have been for most of the year, I don't see him losing 103 points over the next couple of weeks. I feel bad for Denny Hamlin a little bit in this situation because Denny Hamlin had nothing to do with these engine issues. That is on TRD. And honestly, it's really embarrassing for TRD that this ended up happening because they should know better. We have been seeing a lot of engine issues, whether it's quality control issues or whether it is engine failures. We saw it at Gateway with Christopher Bell. We saw it, of course, with Ty Gibbs for a couple weeks at the Brickyard 400 and, of course, at Pocono. We've seen Christopher Bell. We've seen Denny Hamlin. I believe he's had engine issues in the past. Mark Truex Jr. had an engine issue at Richmond. Then, of course, Sheldon Creed and Chandler Smith have both suffered engine issues throughout the portion of the year. We've seen a lot of issues from TRD. And the fact that they're having quality control issues is just unacceptable. They hired Tyler Gibbs, who's been one of the higher-ups at TRD. He will, of course, become the new guy that will be running the operations. This is just unacceptable from TRD. And why does this have major implications? Well, this takes Denny Hamlin from probably someone who was a for-sure Championship 4 contender after how good he's been. This pretty much takes Denny Hamlin potentially out of a chance of making the Championship 4. Could Denny Hamlin still make the Championship 4 if he wins at a track like Martinsville, for example, or Las Vegas? Definitely, there's definitely a good chance he could win one of those races. But Denny Hamlin also has to survive Atlanta Motor Speedway. And yes, Denny Hamlin is a really good super speedway racer. There is no denying that. But Denny Hamlin also has been unlucky at times at super speedways as well, which I think is going to come into play is luck. Denny Hamlin, I think, was a for-sure driver who could have made the Championship 4. And now the fact that he's lost around 19 playoff points potentially is a really major detriment. Now, Denny Hamlin still is not out of it completely, but if I had to put an odd on it right now, I think the chance of Denny Hamlin making the Final Four this year are very slim to slim to none at this particular moment. Because Tyler Reddick's got more playoff points at this point, is likely going to win the regular season championship. Kyle Larson is probably going to make the Championship 4. Chase Elliott's probably going to make it, and Ryan Blaney and Christopher Bell have also been better as of late. And Denny Hamlin's also been very inconsistent. I still think there's a good chance Hamlin gets to the round of 16, gets through the round of 12, and maybe gets to the round of 8 to the Championship 4. But I think at this point, it is very unlikely that Denny Hamlin is going to make the Championship 4. This is just a major screw-up for TRD overall. And like I said, they should be ashamed of themselves for this, for screwing up. They have got to get their engine department under control so things like this don't continue to happen going forward. If this continues going forward, that is going to really, really concern me. And it's crazy to see a team like TRD or an engine department like TRD continue to screw up like this. At least they took accountability, and they're the ones who sent it in. Now, like I said, could they find a way to reduce the penalty down from 75 maybe to 50 points? That could certainly be a possibility, get some of the playoff points back, because Denny Hamlin didn't do anything. That's what's sad about the situation. Denny Hamlin didn't do anything in this situation. It seems like every time Denny Hamlin has a really great chance and a strong opportunity to win the championship, something out of his control seems to go wrong. And it's disappointing for sure for Denny Hamlin that this ended up happening. But they've got to follow the rules at this point. But again, it wasn't Denny Hamlin and Joe Gibbs Racing that messed up. It was TRD. So again, really disappointing situation, all things considered right here. Again, I don't see this getting appealed. I don't see this getting turned over in a big way. Only thing I could see is getting some of the playoff points back. But at this point, I think Denny Hamlin's chance of winning the championship might have just gone out the window because of the situation, in my honest opinion. I think NASCAR did the right thing to penalize them, and TRD should be ashamed of themselves for screwing up in a pretty big way right here. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so that if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Links to below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. Do you feel bad for Denny Hamlin about this or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and what are your thoughts about Hendrick Motorsports suing Hooters? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today on the channel, the paint skin video will look at paint schemes from drivers like Kyle Busch, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Daniel Suarez, you name it. Then later today, we'll have the Kaulig announcement video discussing who will be going there next year or the drivers that could be being announced tomorrow. Then we're also going to have the Xfinity race review and the Shane Van Gisbergen video more than likely. Saturday, we're going to have the starting lineup video for the Cup Series race at Daytona. We'll also have potentially that announcement video coming, and we got a lot of great content dropping this weekend that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.